Coming to you from the Spit Studio in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, this is the Spit Sports Show. If it sounds like I'm out of breath right now, it's because I am. I sprinted all the way home from school after watching what maybe was the best day of hockey I've ever seen in my entire life. Obviously, that's completely recency biased. I know you're probably going to name, on May 14th, this playoff game happened and then this playoff game happened. Shut up. No one cares at this point because we just had banger after banger after banger. I wanted to wait until the end of the US-Sweden game so I could give a bit of a preview for Canada's upcoming game, which we now know is against Finland. But before we get to any of that, that was a lot more stressful than I needed it to be. I knew that Canada playing Czechia for a second time would be nowhere near as easy as the 5-0 shellacking that we gave them in the first game. And in fact, I thought that the first game against Czechia was a lot closer than the final score would indicate, especially in the first two periods when Czechia's top line was incredibly fresh. It just so happened that Canada's depth was so overwhelming, it just kind of took over the rest of that game. Not the case today. Team Canada squeaks away a 4-3 overtime win thanks to the heroics of Mitch Marner's giant, and they advance to the semifinals to play Finland. Oh my gosh, where do I even begin? I have zero notes in front of me, really. I just have player names, and all of my notes are just up here in this hockey watching brain of mine because I am overwhelmed by the awesomeness of this international tournament. Ooh, the ice surface is going to be 3 feet shorter. However, will these NHL players be able to showcase their complete talent? Shut up and enjoy the show, because these little, I shouldn't say little, that's belittling to these teams. These smaller nations, the Finlands, the Czechias, the Switzerlands, the Swedens of the world, this is their World Cup, man, and they treat every game like it is life or death. Every game is a trap game in single game elimination, and Canada almost fell into that trap. I'm going to go quickly beat by beat of how this game went down with just a bunch of thoughts and opinions that I had throughout the game, starting with the fact that Connor McDavid and Macklin Celebrini are just incredible together. They were really throughout the entire game. First goal was kind of a perfect representation of it. McDavid takes on two guys, gets a friendly bounce off his shin pad to get a nice angle going to the right side, drops it back for Celebrini, and Celebrini with a Connor Bedard patented toe drag release to put it through the defenseman's legs and then over the goalie's blocker for a 1-0 lead. Now, I want to stay on this point for a little bit because for all of the great things that I want to say about Team Canada, and I'm sure I'll get to that eventually, I want to start with this. Canada, through periods 1 to 3, and especially after Sidney Crosby went down, which again, coming later, looked incredibly top-heavy, which fascinated me. Because if there was one team that you're playing against, besides probably Germany, who you'd expect to be kind of a one-line team, it would probably be Czechia. Because Pasternak, Necas, and Hertl are obviously all fantastic hockey players. But outside of that, you have second-line center David Kampf and a bunch of guys who really haven't spent much time in the NHL at all. But throughout this entire game, it felt like McDavid and Celebrini were the only line going, with Wilson or McKinnon when Cooper put McKinnon up on that first line. Didn't matter. That was the only line that it felt like had any juice throughout this entire game, which is flatly concerning. And I don't mean to call out any individuals, but I will. Brad Marchand, Sam Reinhart, Brandon Hagel were all invisible throughout this entire game. There are a couple of more names that come to mind, but I'll just stick to those three. I didn't notice them really once throughout the entire 60 minutes. And that's supposed to be the big separator for Canada, is the fact that they can go 4 lines deep against all of these teams and be just fine. They weren't able to today. Team Czechia scores 2 goals, one was just a perfect one-time shot from David Pastrnak. The other was a nice finish from Sedlak. And Canada goes into the second period down 2-1. First deficit that they faced all Olympic tournament. The first time they've been trailing in best on best competition since 2010. They were trailing, I think, at certain points in the Four Nations face-off. Obviously, they lost to the States. But in Olympic best on best competition, first time they trailed since 2010. And then they come back in the second period and their captain goes down. That could have went one of two ways. What I was thinking in the time is how to cope for a Sidney Crosby injury and a Canada loss. Because at that point, we were down, I keep saying we, Canada was down 2-1. And like I said, Canada only had one line going. It was not looking up for that team. Crosby goes down, and in my mind, what I'm thinking is, well, he'd still technically be undefeated in best on best international play because he didn't play for the majority of the game in which Canada lost. So there's a bit of an asterisk attached to it. But in reality, what Team Canada was thinking is this will not be Sidney Crosby's last game at these, or hopefully the future Olympics. He'll be 42 by 2028, or sorry, 2020, 2030. Goodness gracious me, time goes fast. We're not thinking about that right now. They come with a force of vengeance. Nathan MacKinnon fires one home on the power play, which was just a huge goal for a guy who clearly was not skating at 100% throughout this entire game. Moves into the third period. Both teams, to me, were playing incredibly timid throughout the first 10 minutes of that period, but the dam was broken by what could have went down as one of the worst missed calls in the history of hockey, not just international play, but in the history of hockey, when Team Czechia clearly and discernibly had 6 guys on the ice defending Canada's 5-on-5 play, by the way. The net was not pulled. They come back the other way with their extra man, and Andre Palat gets the goal to put Czechia up 3-2. Now, no one noticed it at the time, so I'm not going to put a ton. You know what? Screw that. I am going to put a ton of blame on the refs. That is your job. Seeing 6 guys on the ice should be the easiest penalty to assess on planet Earth. There is no subjectivity to it. You can see it with your own 2 eyes. Now, why did John Cooper not call it out? God only knows. Apparently, none of Canada's players even knew that this was a thing until after the game when James Duthie told them about it. But that's a joke. And what's an even bigger joke is Czechia's coach after the game complaining about said officials who basically awarded Czechia the game-leading goal, saying they felt they were playing 5-on-6 for the majority of that game, which is the most hilarious all-time quote considering how you scored the goal which you thought was going to put you into the semifinals. You literally had 6 guys on the ice. You can't make this stuff up. It's the exact wording of what he said, considering the play which gave Czechia their clutchest lead of the game, is just an all-time contradiction and an all-time joke, and that Czechia coach should be ashamed of himself. I understand that emotions run high after the game. Complaining and whining about the referees is not the way to go about it. They're scared to call a penalty against Canada considering what our power play did. No, they're not. That's not how international referees work. You know what they should be calling? 6 guys on the ice for 30 seconds, which awarded you a goal. Anyways, I'm over it now. Canada ties it up with 4 minutes left. And I got to tell you, between that 7-minute mark when Palat scored and that 4-minute mark, I was in a bad, bad way, hands in my head. I really thought Canada was going to lose. But I remembered with about 5 minutes left, about a minute before that goal, we don't lose best on best international competitions. This is not in our blood. And it's definitely not in Nick Suzuki's blood, who, before this play, was one of the guys who I thought was absolutely invisible throughout the game. Flatly. But he makes the play of his life. Canada goes for a change. He is the only guy left in the offensive zone, takes it 1-on-4 down low, wins 2 battles, gets it back to the point, and has a sick tip between the wickets of Lucas Dostal to tie the game at 3-3. And at that point, I think everybody knew what was coming. The inevitable, the unforsaken great truth of hockey, which is Canada always finds a way. And in overtime, they controlled the majority of play, and it came on the stick of Mitch Marner to finish it off. Now, he has erased every single one of his clutch narratives at this point, right? He assisted Connor McDavid on the game-winning goal of the Four Nations faceoff. He scored an overtime game-winning goal against Sweden to put Canada in that final game, which was not a similar play to this, but it took the same amount of cojones to step up on 3 guys and rip a shot from the slot. And this goal that he scored today just takes an insane amount of confidence, moxie, whatever other adjectives you would like to describe somebody who just wants to get the job done by any means necessary. Goes 1-on-3, terrible defense by the back end, gives up a backhand chance, and Marner just pots it home for to finish what was one of the best games I've ever seen, period. Elliot Friedman said the same thing after the game. He said he didn't smoke, but he needed a cigarette. Me too, Elliot. Me too. I'm going through all of the players that I have written down. Like I said, I have no notes. Oh, yes, Jordan Bennington. Okay. I will admit right off the top of the bat, I have been one of Bennington's harshest critics coming into this tournament. I have been very upright about the fact that I think Logan Thompson should be starting for Team Canada. He has some of the best stats in the NHL. He is one of the best goalies in the world for a team that would be very, very bad if he was not their goalie. Jordan Bennington has some of the worst stats in the NHL and plays for a team that is really, really bad because he's the goalie. But at some point, all of the Bennington criticizers have been kind of coming off of their position and saying, essentially, we give up. This guy's awesome. Play him in all of the clutch moments. He'll figure it out. And they point specifically to that Natchez breakaway save as the moment Bennington had tonight to really, force Canada into that win. And I totally understand that. But my read of Bennington is a little bit different. Did Czechia have 6 goals? 6 goals. 6 players on the ice for their 3rd goal? Yes, they did. It shouldn't have counted. Period. End of story. Should Bennington also have had a save there? It would have been nice. I mean, it wasn't the greatest shot I've ever seen in my life. It wasn't a cross crease where he had no chance. It was just kind of a one-on-one slot matchup with which Palat won very cleanly. Could have used a save there. And on the breakaway, I thought that was more of an incredible hustle play by Devin Taves than it was a great save by Jordan Bennington. Taves very smartly forced Natchez to go to his backhand where he had to take a very flummoxed shot that I'm sure he would not have chosen to take if he had the option to. To me, that was more of a hustle play by Taves than it was an incredible save by Bennington. Now, with this win, Bennington will almost assuredly get the start in the semifinals. Fine. Do I still think he should? No. I'm a body of work guy. I am in every single sport. I care about what you've done consistently over a long period of time. Because to me, that gives me the best sample size of who you truly are. It's a student in school who gets an A on the final, but C's throughout the year. I care a lot more about the C's throughout the year and the consistent effort they've put in rather than this final, me personally. And I'll go with the guy with the body of work, but Bennington's going to get the start, so I'm not going to sit here and complain about it. But Canada's depth has to step up if they want to win this gold medal. Because frankly, they were pathetic today. Canada being a one-line team against Czechia in the Olympics is a joke. Should never happen. And like I said, the guys I mentioned earlier, Brad Marchand, Sam Reinhart, Nick Suzuki before he stepped up, Brandon Hagel, you guys need to take a firm look in the mirror and figure your stuff out because that was just atrocious. Sam Bennett needs to get back in this lineup. I have no idea why he wasn't. I'm one of the biggest Sam Bennett fans there is in big games. I'll never forget the goal he scored against the US in the Four Nations, that disgusting fake move to the inside and shot it over Hellebuck. He's just a big game player. He's not afraid of these moments, and he's just a better forechecker than any of those guys I mentioned, which was Canada's biggest issue from their depth the entire night. Their forecheck was god-awful. Very, very bad. But now they have a date with the Finns, who historically have fared very well against Canada in international competition, both at the World Juniors and in some previous Olympic and World Championships. They're not afraid of Canada. Canada doesn't have the same aura over Finland as they do over a Czechia, which, again, didn't really matter today, but you understand what I mean, or any of these other lesser countries. Finland won't be afraid. And Canada, without Sidney Crosby, is going to need guys like Nick Suzuki and Seth Jarvis and these depth pieces to step up and prove why Canada is the best overall team in the tournament and not just the most talented on their top lines. Thank you all so much for watching, as always. I apologize if this episode was a bit clunky in terms of the flow of it. Like I said, I just kind of watched hockey, wrote down some things, and I wanted to give you guys my thoughts on, again, what was just an amazing Olympic day. Give me your thoughts on what you took away from that Canada-Czechia game and the US-Sweden game, and the Swiss-Finland game was awesome too. Holy crap. In the comments below, I'm small enough as to where I can respond to all comments. Love doing so drop something down there. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Spit Sports Show, just over 420 subscribers. Big things happening on this channel. As always, I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out. I love you guys.